There is a lot to know if you want to be the best director you can, but only one thing really matters.
Hello?
Watch this. What do you feel? What about this? Cinema is a visual language, but in order to enjoy a movie or understand it, you don't need to learn it, because this is a language that's as innate to you as breathing. Although our visual field, our angle of perception as humans, is technically always a wide shot. We don't have zoom lenses in our eyeballs, so our angle of view never changes. However, what we choose to focus on is constantly shifting. The camera is an active eye, and shots mimic the way that we choose to focus our attention on different things. So it emulates our conscious visual experience, but it also emulates our unconscious visual experience, which is the omnipotent eye that we see through in dreams. There is a second part to this language. You could think of it as grammar. And it's this second part that the power of cinema really comes from. It's called juxtaposition. Take this shot here. It's pretty innocuous, but now combine it with this shot. See, now you have a story, you have tension, you have expectation. Your brain has connected these two visuals and drawn meaning from the connection between them. It's just like joining the dots. Let's say I started with this shot, but then I cut to this shot instead. Now we have a completely different story. You see, shots on their own cannot contain the entirety of a film's meaning. Meaning in film story is created by juxtaposing shots together. Eventually you end up with a sequence of juxtaposed shots, which is long enough to be considered a film. David Mamet refers to this principle as the juxtaposition of uninflected images. And what that means is pairing of otherwise disconnected visuals together to create meaning. That is filmmaking. Why does juxtaposition work so effectively? Well, our brains are pattern-seeking computers. We find patterns in anything, even random noise. That includes audio noise. Have you ever heard voices in the night and then found out, oh, it's just the wind? It's the same thing. You see, we have evolved to look for patterns within chaos. It's helped us to identify and predict things like threats. You know, the ape ancestor that noticed the grass moving and thought maybe there's a tiger in that grass, so they ran away. That's the ape that survived. Now, maybe it was just the wind moving the grass, but tigers do hide in the grass. So just like the ape ancestor, your brain is trying to match known patterns against chaos. However, there is a sort of side effect which comes along for the ride, and that is that we find patterns when there aren't any there. We see faces in the clouds. We connect behaviors that have nothing to do with one another.
I don't like the way he looked at me.
We connect events that have no connection. This is the basis for all superstition. Lightning struck just as I told a lie. This child was born with a birth defect under a full moon. Let's go murder every child born under a full moon. Film takes advantage of this undesirable side effect of evolution, and it uses it to compel our interest in a narrative, but also to convey meaning. We cannot help joining dots. So know this before you decide on your shots, because an audience will just impose meaning onto them that you may not intend. When you start out making films, you often find yourself asking the question, where do I put the camera? Well, the answer to that is in the script. What's really happening in the scene? Okay, I'm talking about the subtext. So you've got this surface level events, but the real meaning of the scene is in the subtext. Once you know the subtext, you know what to shoot, because the camera is a conveyor of subtext. It's not a witness to events, it's an active eye. The choice of shot subtly conveys the meaning of that moment of the story, which is also known as a beat. But how do you even know what shots to use? Alright, this brings us back to the language of cinema. The close-up, the wide shot, the mid shot, the dolly shot, high angle, low angle, tracking, handheld. You can choose any one of these shots for any beat you want, but some will be more effective than others for that given beat. It's just like if you got two people in the office to tell the exact same story. Even if they had a script to follow, one of them will tell it better, because that one person will just have a better instinct for which words to emphasize for effect. So like a language, certain words and phrases always mean the same thing, right? It's the same with shots. For example, this camera move here, it's a slow push in. It always means that we're about to gain insight into something within the scene. It's a subtle instruction to you, the audience. And the camera move mimics the way that you would lean in to pay closer attention to a storyteller. A faster dolly in on a character means there's been a sudden shift in perspective, emotion, or insight from the character's point of view. The rushed motion of the camera is to mimic the flood of adrenaline or the dawning of a realization. This classic move is achieved by dollying in fast and zooming out at the same time. In this version, we are dollying out and zooming in at the same time. They mean different things. The Jaws one is to mimic the rush of adrenaline and sudden panic at the realization of, holy shit, the shark has just killed a child. It's interesting because it ends on a frame where the wide-angle lens is quite close in proximity to Roy Scheider's face, so it distorts it a little bit. Now, this is a deliberate choice. I think it's because this little bit of a distortion on Roy Scheider's face is to suggest that sick feeling that he must have in his stomach. If they used a different lens, they used a long lens and they dollied out and zoomed in, then the depth of field would be compressed behind him and it would be a much more romantic type shot. In the Goodfellas example, and I'm going to spoil Goodfellas, so if you haven't seen it, go watch it. The depth of field is being compressed by the zoom, which is to suggest the feeling of the world closing in around Henry. And this is exactly what's happening in that scene. This is the scene where Henry realizes that his closest friend is now his enemy. You see, the camera is a conveyor of subtext. Low angles are always used to suggest dominance of the subject. Imposing characters are always shot from below. Shooting a character from above belittles them. It's used to suggest that a character is out of their depth or feeling isolated. Now, these are all subtle messages that are worked into the frame, and they are deliberate. I really like the opening scene here from Greta Gerwig's version of Little Women. The whole scene is extremely well directed, so much information in every frame, but I want to focus on this last cut here. Joe has just sold a short story to a newspaper for a decent amount of cash. And we cut from these static shots to this fluid tracking shot. Why? This conveys Joe's elation and validation. The motion of the camera conveys the emotions the character is feeling. What about this shot? What do you think it means? Let me know in the comments. It's also vital to consider blocking. How actors are positioned within the frame and where they end up is directly linked to the subtext of the scene. You see this shot here. The blocking alone conveys the meaning. The standard model for shooting a scene is this. Usually you will start out wide, and then as the scene naturally progresses towards a climax, as most scenes should, your coverage will become tighter and tighter until you end up in a close-up. Now, of course, you can start out a scene in close-up, but there's nowhere to go after that. You're going to have to move back out to wide shots, and eventually it will move back into close-ups as the scene climaxes.
Why do you go on these trips with me, Ed? I like my life, Louis. Yeah, but why do you go on these trips with me?
Now, this might seem restrictive, but it's simply a language. Is English restrictive? It can be a powerful choice to not use this convention, to say, shoot the whole scene as a wide shot, or have the camera focused entirely on one character while the other character's off screen for the whole scene, or to shoot the whole scene in a two-shot. I'm just saying you need to know why you've made that choice, and the justification has to be a story reason. All of these shots are vital to quality filmmaking. They should be figured out well ahead of time with your director of photography. They are also extremely potent, so be careful how you use them. For example, be careful not to overuse a close-up. It's the most potent of shots. Use it once in a scene at the most dramatic moment. The more you use a close-up, the more you're just diluting its effects. Handheld is particularly effective, or it was, when it used to be contrasted within a film of otherwise locked off shots. And when I say locked off, I mean shots that are on a tripod or a dolly or some kind of mount. Handheld is really good for suggesting instability, turmoil, chaos within the mind of a character, or for some kind of frenetic coverage, maybe a chase, a foot chase or something like that. That's what handheld's great for. But looking at the coverage of this Hunger Games sequel, it's really disappointing. Almost every single shot in this film is handheld, and I don't know why. It really doesn't serve any meaningful purpose, and I'm finding it very hard to justify from an artistic point of view. So I'm left to wonder if maybe it's because they had a ridiculous schedule to keep, and they had no time at all, so they had to just shoot everything handheld. I don't know, but if somebody worked on this, please let me know. I'd love to know the reason for this decision, and maybe you could help me understand why this scene was shot handheld, for example. It's just people in a room talking. There's no need for it. Anyway, knowing which type of shot to use at any given moment, that is directing. I'm really big on the poetry of opening shots to a film. In my opinion, this coupled with the final shot of a film are the most thematically potent shots that you choose. Let me show you what I mean. You see, films are visual poems. This is my thing about the difference between films and television. Television is more about relationship conflict. Cinema is about the unconscious. Now, don't get me wrong, I love television. It's just a different beast, and I'll go more into that in another video. Television still uses close-ups at scene climaxes and wide shots and mid shots and dollies. It's using the same kind of grammar, but rarely does it have the time or the budget or just the one-off self-contained format of cinema to really speak the exact same metaphorical language. Films, however, are self-contained poems about the human condition. And this meaning needs to be reflected in the structure of the story and the choice of shots. So we have this main opening shot here from Bridge on the River Kwai, one of the greatest films of all time. You already know the very theme of the film from one shot. One shot. I mean, look at the poetry in this frame. I just don't see much of this kind of thing from directors today. Now, you don't have to do this with your opening shot. I'm just saying, look how thematically powerful it is. Tell me you're not invested. Do you not want to watch the rest of this film? It's even more potent and powerful emotionally if it's your final shot. If you can summarize your film's entire theme in one frame and end your film on that shot, you've got a winner. Let's look at this opening shot here. It's from Saving Private Ryan. What do you think it means? Same shot, used in Born on the 4th of July. Do they mean the same thing? How about this opening shot from Bridge of Spies? The meaning is evident. Who is this man? How many versions of him are there? You see, it's very deliberate. Spielberg knows what he's doing. Just as a fun example of shot selection, I'm going to go through my own short film, not because I think it's great or something, but because I remember the thought process that went into every single choice of shot. We had one day to shoot it, so we had to be very economical, and every shot had to mean something. Plus, I also own the rights to it, so it makes it a little bit easier. Okay, just opening establishing shots to tell you who the protagonist is. He's a jogger. That's all you need to know right now. There's one shot in here from the front just to throw you off from the scent so that you're not too suspicious straight away. This wide shot here is purely to establish that we're in an affluent neighborhood. That's all this shot needs to do. Again, we're staying back in these wide shots from him because I don't want you to empathize with him too much. The only information you need to retain here is that he's forgotten the code and he's had to write it down. Mail's piled up, we don't know why. Just more daily routine stuff. Again, holding back from him, nothing too intimate. Okay, obviously this shot, there's something more to him. That's why he's out of focus in the left panel, in the reflection. So again, it's just telling you that there's more to this than meets the eye. He's saying goodbye to somebody or saying good morning to somebody in bed. And again, deliberately we keep them off screen, but also his interaction is again meant to throw you off the set.
Love you.
There's information underneath the frame here that we can't quite see. This little split frame here, again, we're only seeing half the picture. That's literally what it's saying. So now this is the beginning of the big reveal stuff. We see why he's written, we're piecing together why he's written the code down, why the mail's piled up. And it becomes apparent that this is not even his home. And the reason why the camera is this floating camera now is because that's the way our thoughts work. There isn't a divide between our thoughts as we piece together a narrative. They kind of bleed into one another. And now it's the camera's job to just tell you the story, what was going on in each of these previous shots. What was happening under the frame that we couldn't see. And there's the reveal of the person that he said goodbye to in bed. So it's very deliberately an upside down crucifixion. We added a digital distortion to the frame just to accentuate the horror.
I'll be back tonight. I'll be thirsty.
It's the only close-up of this character, and it's because this is the only moment where his nature is revealed. He's a psycho, he's taken over this poor couple's home, and he's kept the woman locked under the stairs, and basically she's next. And this is just a final moment of the camera telling you who really does own this house. Right, so that's a beginner's guide to directing and just what to start thinking about to help elevate your filmmaking. Trust me, not everybody thinks of this stuff. They just go out and shoot and they hope for the best. But you're not like that because you want to make great films, right? Of course, there's a lot more to this, like lenses, working with actors, color grading, editing, music composition. It all eventually comes under the umbrella of directing. But ultimately, you need to convey the subtext of every given scene to those specialists so they understand the meaning, what's going on underneath the scene, right? That's your job. So to summarize, it's your job to know why. Why does this need to be a two-shot? Why are we putting the dolly from there to there? Why is this a crane shot? Why are you doing this as a close-up? The answer to all of those questions is in the story. So all you need to do is know the story. Please let me know if you think I've left anything important out, or if you want to push back on anything, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm very open to discussion. And as I always say, if you're feeling down about your abilities, just look at what gets made. Thanks for watching.